Hello. Welcome to yet another good episode of To the Fullest 2TF. I am your host, Ivan Mapevagwada, and on today's episode, I'm so honored and glad to host one of the vibrant young person who's advocating about the environment. And you know what we are about. As To the Fullest, we are about having a conversation to the fullest without leaving anything behind. We are about inspiration. We are about learning, relearning, and unlearning. Before we dive in the conversation of today, we would want to know who our guest is, how their life was growing up. My good sir, how are you?
Fine, thank you. How are you, sir?
No, I'm glad. We are happy to host you. I offer you at the safe journey. Let me make it known. The man just traveled all the way from Kabwe. This means a lot. Right. Thank you very much for coming through.
Sure, thank you very much, and I'm so glad to be part of this conversation.
So how are you, and how is Kabwe?
Kabwe is all right. The people are good. Away from the different environmental struggles that we do face on a daily basis, because if you come to Kabwe, every day looks like a normal day when it's not supposed to be like that. Because the people in Kabwe are battling with challenges that has to do with late contamination. But in general, the people are good. Kabwe is okay.
Born and bred in Kabwe?
No, I wasn't born in Kabwe. I was born in Chingola on the Copperbelt province. Yes, then I moved to live in Kabwe in the year 2008.
Oh wow.
Yes.
You know that 2008, that's where I started school.
Great to know. I'd started school by then.
So when we talk of Caleb, how was life like growing up?
Good question, and I think it's one of the questions that I've never responded to. Growing up, I think it's been a lot of experience. Of course, there's been a lot of shift, there's been a lot of transformation, and there's also been a lot of learning. I moved to live in Kabwe in the year 2008, just like I said, because in Kabwe, in Chingola, you'd wake up in the morning to see miners going for work, because there is a lot of mining that is happening there. Coming back to Kabwe is a business district, and of course I was greeted by lead pollution when I moved to Kabwe, because I lived in one of the lead hotspot areas back there, and I used to go to a school that is exposed to amounts of lead pollution. So I grew up in that particular space, and I feel that's where my activism journey started. I joined a club back in school called Ecological Club that used to have, and I believe that they're still having conversations around the environment, how people can best protect themselves and what's not. In the year 2016, I had an opportunity to speak at the United Nations office in Geneva to talk about environmental toxicants and children's environmental rights. And I feel that is where expansion in my activism journey started. Came back in Kabwe, and I told my story there at the United Nations office in Geneva, and had an opportunity to also go to Germany to share the same stories. And I came back to Kabwe. I shared at the Civil Society SADC Forum in Windhoek, Namibia, stories on issues that children in Kabwe are facing. And over the days, my journey has been focused around that, to advocate for a better environment. And going forward, I began to realize how environmental key decision-making processes could then now shape how our environment is going to be, because there are people that are deciding on policies, people that are deciding on implementation frameworks and whatnot. So now the civic space now became an important part of me. So the civic space and the environmental space cannot work in isolation. They must be an holistic approach in terms of us finding permanent solutions when it comes to the environment, both in the civic space and in the environmental space. So there's so much to tell about my growing up, but we are here now speaking about the environment, advocating for young people to take up the spaces, and also going to children to have these conversations. I go by the concept, catch them young, so that when they grow up, they don't depart from what they have learned. It's difficult to tell a person that has grown up environmentally unconscious to begin to take those practices. But we know that if we build environmental stewards, we are building a generation that will then be informed on how best they're going to protect the environment.
You know one thing about our podcast, we bring young, vibrant, energetic youths, even when they speak, I'm like, God Almighty. And it's always funny and so inspiring when you think you know a person, then you realize you just know 0 points. A percentage of them,
Right.
Yeah, and I've done some research and I've come to understand a little bit about the impact that lead has done on Kabwe from way back until now, and how it's still affecting people. But in your explanation, maybe before I come to the topic, I think you've answered my question I wanted to ask, but I would love to ask, we're talking of the environment and you talked about policies. So how do you feel when people are making policies about the environment? These are people who understand nothing about the environment. These are people who are just there because of maybe political positions, maybe they are voted in. So for you as an activist, for you as the passion and the love for the environment, and you want to see a better Kabwe and a better Zambia and a better world, how do you feel when you see people making policies are people who have no knowledge of what we are going through in the community?
Right. I want to choose to believe to say that the reason why the government has set up these line ministries is because they are trying to find expertise in each of the issues that we are facing in our communities daily. That's why we have today we have the Ministry of Green Economy that could specifically speak to the issues that has to do with the environment, climate change, because climate change back then we just used to hear about it, but it is not a distant threat right now. We have seen high temperatures, we have faced the droughts. All these speaks to how now climate change is not a distant threat. I've spoken about us having community tribunals, because now communities will begin to share their experiences, because those people that are deciding on policies today, what they know is information that has come from reports, right? Like for example, if we speak about the issue of lead contamination today in Kabwe, it is something maybe somebody in Lusaka might have just read in the Human Rights report, Human Rights Watch report, to say this is the kind of contamination that is going in Kabwe. For the case of cyanometals, maybe it is something that you have read over the internet to say there is this kind of particular contamination that is happening. But if you go back to the people that are living in Chambishi, people that are living on the Copper Belt, they are able to tell you their real life stories, because they're the ones that are directly facing the impact, right? If you go back to Kabwe, there are children today that have tested extreme amounts of lead pollution in their blood. For them, they don't need to read a report from Human Rights Watch. It is something that they are feeling in their body. They are facing those impacts. They are feeling the fatigue. They are facing the memory loss. They are facing the nervous system damage, right? So now the build-up of community tribunals could then now inform the policies that we are speaking about today. So that's why it becomes important for us to have these community tribunals, because we are dealing with testimonials, we are dealing with real life stories. The government is setting up a multi-sectoral approach where we have the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Mines, because we understand to say mines will now begin to regulate on the environmental risk assessments, right? Then the Ministry of Education will be able to focus on the disability screening process with regards to education, to begin to identify, as we are providing these services, are these effects caused by lead pollution, or they are occurring naturally because a person was born with this, right? So these are approaches that we now begin to see. So these gaps will now begin to help us appreciate the steps that the government is supposed to take, by being able to understand to say that we cannot just decide on policies for people that are sitting in Kabwe. We cannot just decide on policies for people in Chambeshi without engaging them. That is why it is supposed to reflect in our national budgets. So the national budget must, in very determined ways, look into the resources of the country, begin to identify these challenges. We cannot just say we are going to set out a general standard of practice to be able to deal with the issue of climate change. Because this year you may face a drought, right? And you begin to set an implementation to say we are going to deal with a drought, but next year you'll be surprised to say you are facing flooding. So climate change doesn't have one solution to deal with all the devastating environmental impacts or the climate change impacts. So now we need to set strategies by being able to identify what is the unique challenge in Chambishi, what is the unique challenge in Kabwe, and what is the unique challenge basically in Zambia, so that we can have an adaptation plan. And we need to foresee this. This is why we have departments like the meteorology department, so that because our hydrological systems could then now project to say this is an impact that we are going to have. So we need a system that will engage the people, the decision makers, and the key actors, and then it is coming back to the communities so that they are able to take up these adaptation measures. So it's a whole process.
So you've talked about community tribunal, and you've all put it well how the government is working, trying to combat or fight this and the plans that are going on. Maybe to someone out there who don't understand, maybe by definition, what is a community tribunal? In simple terms for someone to understand out there.
Right. So basically, every time we're having conversations, we are talking about people being able to speak out in communities over the challenges that they're facing, right? But do they then have a platform where they could be able to speak, right? We have told young people to say, go and engage with your councillors, go and engage with your member of parliament. But do they then have a platform where they could be able to interact with their civic leaders, right? So a community tribunal is just a platform that could be laid down to a specific unique challenge. It may be about civic participation. It may be about environmental decision making, right? So that process where we are able to now identify, like I'm going to give a straight example because I am from Kabwe, and the story of late pollution is one that is close to heart, because as much as it is impacting a lot of people, there is a lot of learning, right? So somebody may just be on the receiving end because they are reading about it, but there are people that are feeling it, right? So those people that are feeling it could be able to tell it better, right? So now that process that we have where they could be able to speak about this unique challenge they're facing is a community tribunal. Testimonials from the communities.
That's very important. So we're talking of the community, we're talking the government and the part. So maybe my question is, you've been an activist of the environment and you've been young. Do you feel you've been given enough ear from relevant authority to be heard, and every time you present the issues in the community, do you feel you get the right response or the right answer which we are looking for or you are looking for in the community as an activist?
Right. I want to be so straight about this. First of all, let me begin by saying to be an advocate is a privilege, because you're not just speaking about yourself. You are representing the voices of many people that are living in your community, right? For example, in my case, it is not just about a story about me. My story is not a unique one. If you go back to Kabwe, my story is each person is facing this kind of impacts in the environment where we're coming from, right? So now I know I am carrying the burden every time, even when I'm speaking to you. It is not just my story that I'm telling. It is the story of many different people that do not have this platform. It is a story of many different people that does not have an opportunity to come and sit with you and be able to tell this story. And every time our attempt is that we get to have a lot of attention, right, on this issue, because the more attention we have on the issue is the more reassurance we have that something is going to be done about this particular issue that we are facing. And along the way, we have told our stories in very different ways. Sometimes it is an emotional experience that you even get to cry when you are telling these stories. But unfortunately, the people that we are telling these stories to, they can only sympathize with our stories and cannot cannot do so much, right? And sometimes we have seen the blame game within the space, right? We have a project that have been running in Kabwe. It is called the Zambia Mining Environmental Remediation Improvement Project, something like that. It is focused on being able to provide a remediation program for the people of Kabwe, starting from education, testing, treatment, and also a permanent solution to the issue of lead pollution. And I feel most of the times that we have tried to engage over this project, you find to say that they are all referring to this project as a best practice that deals with the issue of lead pollution in Kabwe. But if I tell you for a fact that project is limited in scope, it is no longer running, as we say. And if we look at the intervention areas back in Kabwe, we have like 7 lead hotspot areas. I'm not going to go to areas that today the ongoing mining activities have exacerbated the situation, right? I'll speak about those existing that have long faced the impacts, right? So you find to say we have 7 lead hotspot areas, but the intervention areas are few. I'm going to talk about mine. I'm going to talk about Magandanyama and Muto and Sofu. These are 3 intervention areas where we have seen the paving of yards so that they could suppress the lead dust, right? But we have like 4 more communities, right? So that is like not even more than half, right? So that is limited in scope. And when I talk about the blame game, you find to say that you go to the municipal council today, they are going to tell you to say we want to set up these bylaws in these communities, but our efforts are limited because already a body that is above us, that I'm talking about ZEMA, Zambia Environmental Management Agency, right? They have already gone before us to give authority, to give license so that these ongoing mining activities can go on. So meaning to say their scope there now is limited, the intervention is limited, right? You talk about, you go to a civic leader today that will tell you to say, me is my role goes as far as just being able to speak in parliament to say this is what we need in Kabwe. I am not an implementer, I am a policymaker. So those are situations. So the blame game still goes on, and I feel that has long delayed what we are supposed to have in Kabwe. It is an issue that is already in the international space, but our leaders don't want to own up and say let's find out a permanent solution that we are going to give to this particular problem, right? I'm going to give you a practical example. We have a government that is in power. It is in power for 4 years now, right? Every day they are setting out a budget, right? In 2021 they set a budget. 2022 they set a budget. In 2025 we have seen them set a budget yet again, and I am going to tell you for a fact that there is nowhere in that budget where there is a specific approach on how we are going to deal with the issue of lead pollution in Kabwe. Does it mean the government does not know about the lead pollution in Kabwe? They do know about the lead pollution issue in Kabwe. It is an issue that is already in the international space. We have seen a number of reports from the Human Rights Watch. We have seen a number of reports from different civil society organizations. And I'm going to tell you for a fact that civil society organizations, the NGOs, they are doing so much as far as the government is not doing. Let's talk about awareness raising. We have seen a lot of young people that are raising awareness over this issue. Let's talk about a government approach, a best practice from the government. I'm going to tell you for a fact, I live in Kabwe. Maybe for another person in their community, maybe they're able to see these things. But in my community, Makululu, where I'm coming from, I haven't seen an intervention from the government. Apart from in 2011, when I moved to live in Kabwe, there was a project that was running under the Ministry of Health where they were testing, giving soya, giving milk, and they're also doing soul swap in my community. And that is something that we are not seeing today. So it is a process, and I hope we could see a change. And I hope we could see more.
All right. So I was in Kabwe a month or 2 ago, and I was privileged to visit this mine because of the person I was with. They were like, okay, let's just show you, so you have an understanding of what's going on in Kabwe and some challenges people are facing. And I got a privilege to visit and move around different communities, and I reached a certain mine area, I don't know the name specifically, and there's already a dam which is built, I'm sure you know, because of this reed mine, it ended up building its own dam, and I saw people working there without any proper PPE. And I saw people drinking water from the same mine. But my question is, don't authority know about that? And you being an advocate, every time you speak to people being found there working in those areas, do they agree when you tell them, no, this is non-health, let's take you somewhere? Will these people agree?
I'm going to tell you for a fact that my engagement is not just about me speaking here today. The community where I'm coming from, people are working under risk conditions, right? And if you're advocating for the environment, if you don't talk about the issue of lead pollution in Kabwe, then you've not talked about much in Kabwe, because that is what is affecting a lot of communities. And I'll tell you for a fact that those young people that are working under those risk conditions, they already know to say that they're exposing themselves to extreme amounts of lead pollution. And I have engaged with them on a personal level. I have gone there to do reports on artisanal mining, because those are people that are not licensed to work in those mines, right? But if I tell you for a fact, Kabwe is a ghost town. By ghost town, I mean to say it had a lot of industrial activities that were going on before. I'm going to talk about Kifko packaging. I am going to talk about the Mulungushi textiles, right? But the closing of these industries now leaves young people at the disadvantage of being able to look for formal employment. A lot of young people in Kabwe don't have formal employment. So lead and zinc mining is a profit-making business for them, right? You are going to go today, if I take you to Kabwe today and go to speak to these people, they are going to tell you for a fact to say that we are ready to leave this place to go and find an alternative of where we are going to work. But what we don't have as at now is that alternative of where we're going to work. Because the battle is we need to feed our families, right? Those are people that are into marriages. Those are young people that do not have formal employment. And what they are looking for genuinely is formal employment. What they are looking for genuinely is work that is going to bring food on their table. So as far there is a job that is going to bring food on their table, you are not going to see people that are going to work in those spaces. And over the days, the Mulungushi textile has been hope for the people of Kabwe to say we are going to find formal employment. But over the days, it has been a political tool. And we have seen intervention now to say it is going to be opened, and that is where the eyes of the young people today are. And we are hoping to say that if that is set out, then we are not going to see a lot of young people being in that space. CDF is a game changer, and we hoped to see so much that is going to happen when it comes to addressing the issue of lead pollution. Because I hoped to say that because the council is a spending agency, they are going to have keen interest for those people that are working in that particular space, and they are going to prioritize those people. But what we have seen is empowerment for photographers, right? What we have seen is for small holder businesses, right? But what about those people that are working in that particular space? So those are priorities that we need to set out, so that then we don't have a lot of young people to work under risk conditions.
No, that's great. Maybe in general, as a nation or the world, how important is a clean environment? How does it help to know the productivity of a nation or families of people or the inhabitant of every nation or this world?
Vagwada, the environment is very important. The environment is very, very important. And having a clean environment is more important, right? Because we know to say people are going to live healthy, right? If you go back in Kabwe, there are children that are recognized by their performance in class. You are able to tell to say this is the kind of community that this child is coming from, right? But that is something that we have looked over a long period of time. You just identify, you look at a child to say, vakuma kududu, vakumine. Those are spaces that are in the lead hotspot areas. And people already know to say that the issue of lead pollution is going to cause concentration issues. It's going to cause memory loss, right? But those are things that we have, and it has been looked more as an invisible issue, right? But a clean environment is very much important. We can talk about many different issues, if we run away, you may say, I'm just from Kabwe and this is an issue that I want to prioritize. But let's leave the issue of lead pollution alone. Let's go to the issue of drought, right? Because if we are talking about an environment that is safe, we cannot run away from the fact to say that we are dealing with environmental degradation. It is not just about the environment being clean, there is no paper, no.
Yeah.
We are talking about the counter reaction from the environment because of human activities.
Yeah.
Waste mismanagement is a contributor today to climate change, right?
Yeah.
So if you go back to spaces where solid waste management is not so strict, you find to say it is going to, those spaces are going to be breeding spaces for pests and flies.
Yeah.
That is why you see to say spaces like Lusaka are more prone to the issue of cholera, right?
Yeah.
Because we do not have best practices to best manage this waste, right? So as far as that is not there, the people are going to be affected, the environment is going to be affected. So protecting the environment is just as important. We'll leave that issue, we'll go to the copper belt, and we'll look at the issue of cyanometals, right?
Yeah.
We see a discharge of chemicals in the water, right? It is the environment. People are now facing those impacts. So now we need to lay out processes that could then protect the environment, and that is what we need. We need a unique solution for each unique challenge that our communities are facing, and it is as important. So if the environment is not safe, if the environment is not clean, meaning to say the people will continue being affected and will continue facing the devastating impact of environmental degradation.
All right. Yeah, so on today's podcast, I'm having a conversation with Caleb, who is an environmental advocate. I want to make it known to you to say Mr. Caleb is running a podcast which is called Envirocast, right?
Right.
Yeah, please, Envirocast. Check them out on Facebook and YouTube. I know there are people out there who have so much interest about the environment. We have a lot of advocates who are trying to speak of a better community. Mr. Caleb is running a podcast which we can go ahead. If you want to learn more, if you want to reach out, if you want to learn more about lead in Kabwe, you have to know about how to protect your environment, your community, your house. Check them out, follow them, ask questions, inbox them. And if you want to bring them maybe to speak to your pupils, students in different schools and different organizations, please do well by reaching out and just get them to, try to inspire and educate your learners about the importance of, a clean environment. He just said in his preamble to say he believes in teaching people while they are still young, because there is even a saying to say it's easy to write on a wet cement than a dry one.
Yeah.
So let's start right now and speak to our young ones, our young learners, about the importance of clean environment, about the importance of keeping our environment good and healthy, because like the example he said, in a class of 5 people, you are able to tell this one is performing like this because they are coming to an environment like this. This one is performing like this because they are coming from an environment like this, which is not supposed to be the case. So on today's conversation, we were talking about the importance of environment, or just learning, trying to have a conversation about the environment, what the government is doing, some challenges being faced in Kabwe. But maybe before we close, any closing words?
I always close by the words of Robert Swan, but I'm going to send a message to the government.
Yeah.
And this is a call to action for all our government and for all our people, right?
Yeah.
We need a project that is government-led, but with a multi-sectoral approach.
Yeah.
This is our daily conversation. This is our daily recommendation in Kabwe.
Yeah.
We need a project that is government-led, but with a multi-sectoral approach. And we need a permanent solution to the issue of lead pollution in Kabwe. Over and above, we need a strong political will. And what we also need urgently is an environmental court. We don't have an environmental court. If we have an environmental court, we then know that we can press a demand on these environmental impacts that we are facing. And finally, I am going to close by the words that I always close on. I close by the words of Robert Swan that says, the greatest threat to the environment is living under the belief that someone else is going to take care of it.
Yeah. The greatest threat to environment is living under the impression that someone is going to take care of it. I have been your host, Ivan Mapeva Gwada. Until next time, bye-bye.